All right. Well, first of all, I'm Adam Abraham, co-founder of the President Water Company. We make things like this. These are called Vortex generators. And we get questions about what they do and why. We've gone through a whole bunch of trouble, so to speak. I'm not going to call it trouble, in the sense of woe is me. But we've gone through a lot of effort and spent a lot of time to continue bringing the idea of these things forward. I personally have helped others, I'm just going to say it, do pretty well for themselves and for their companies and for their customers, I hope, as I discovered myself and learned about what these things are, what they do, and more importantly, about water and about its nature, and why things like this are actually useful, beneficial, I would even say important, in order to get the most, or let us say potential, from your water. And I mean the most in the way of the best. I mean in the way of, instead of me going into it, the purpose of this video, because you might have seen the length of it, there's quite a bit more to this video. And it's not me standing by this stream talking. What this video is going to be about, and is a conversation I had with a young lady, Anita I knew I was going to do this. Narayan. She's from the UK. She contacted me because she had questions about what these devices, what this technology does, and why it's important. And so what is going to follow is her questions, and essentially is our dialogue, our interaction about vortex generators, first of all. But it also goes into why we're doing this, why certainly I'm doing it, and I think in many ways she describes for herself why she's asking the questions, why it matters to her. And because of that, we both thought it was worthwhile to share all of it. I could have just snipped here and there and kept just to the point. But the point is this: how do we change the quality of our life, the quality of our health, by keeping the same ways of thinking? So what you're going to hear are also ways of thinking that I'll say guide both of us. And I know there's enough of you out there, they guide you too. So with that, here's Anita and me.
So thank you for giving me some time just to go through your the water that and the different water products that you do, Adam. Sure. I think I saw you. I was just thinking and trying to remember back, because I bookmarked your page. I think I saw you. I think you do some like podcasting stuff, don't you? And I can't remember how I connected onto your channel or your YouTube thing. And then me being me, kind of like just dug around a bit more, just because it's difficult to know these days who you're dealing with on the internet. Some people are more, there's just all sorts out there to keep it very
Sure.
brief. I like to just try and find out a little bit more, listen to a little bit to get the feel of a person. And I think I saw you as well. You did a video on I think then it was called like the Mining Max, that little machine.
Oh, yeah. The mini miner.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. I think it went south a bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, just I kind of came back to look at your site about the water thing, because that's something I've been quite concerned about, and just to kind of give you, if I can, my my little brief and why I'm looking at this. So basically, I run my own coaching mentoring company, all in the field of personal growth, to keep it brief. And I've written a book. It's been recommended for screen, but I've held off on that because Hollywood is infested with all sorts of things that I don't really want to get into. It's a real eye opener because the book I've written is based around my own personal story, overcoming tragedy and finding my joy and purpose again. And I feel quite strongly on in terms of what I would describe as my calling, if you like. I don't mean that in a religious sense, but which is really to make inspiration the norm, or use my gifts to help with that.
Agreed.
And
I relate to that.
Thank you so much. We live in a world that unfortunately is a little bit of a jungle, where especially when you get into business type of things, where you're having to navigate and find out who the genuine heart-centered, entrepreneurs are, rather than just people who are money driven and therefore very capitalist and manipulative, taking advantage of things. And it's been something of a jungle that way, my own experience anyway. But learning to navigate through that and find out who the people are genuinely, like it with yourself, trying to create something of value that is going to impact people's lives. And that look after the community as well, not just part with your money and then goodbye, type thing. And these are the things I try and be in my own business, because I believe in leading by example. And so where I am with things, I have a nursing background, come from a service background. And so health has been something that has been a passion of mine for a long time. And I worked in psychiatry as opposed to general nursing, but then have come into my own, mentoring and coaching business to try and have more freedom to help people with stuff that you won't hear in conventional practice.
Sure.
It's all medication and all the other stuff that, and so where I'm at is I'm preparing my business to go on the blockchain without spending the hundreds and thousands and having to know coding, with a company that have made that possible. And I'm also building my own television network on that, because of really wanting to depart from the media that is mainstream media, and build a channel around inspiration and freedom, the concept of freedom. And so the reason to share that is that, first of all, there's my own individual needs within that, which is that the whole thing around water, here in the UK and where I live, I don't know what's in the water here, but here in Basingstoke, where I live, more than a lot of parts of the country, the issue with scale is very bad. Having to constantly scale appliances, it's really bad. And then it's foul smelling, the water here. So, I don't know what's in it, but it's particularly bad in this area. And what I've been doing is using, kind of going back and forth, researching water filters as the, next thing to just chemical treatment, and gone between ionizers and that. And then, of course, I read your site about your approach. And so I have questions around my own individual needs and consumption.
Sure.
But the reason I've shared you a bit of background is that anything that's, worth its weight in gold in terms of good quality, I'm happy to share with other people who are looking to impact their health, and certainly through my own coaching and mentoring, to be able to either point or provide as, products and services in my own coaching practice, to say, look, try this, type thing. but it's off the back of me utilizing and trying things. So, like for example, on the TV channel and in the coaching, if it's something I try happens to be good, irrespective of whether there's an affiliate program or not. I don't rely on affiliate things for my income. Happy to share and get the word round.
Sure.
Just a bit of background for you. So my question individually is, I'm not a great techie person, and I was quite intrigued by what you shared about, kind of what seems to be like vortex maths. And please correct me if I'm getting anything wrong here. And I was reading your stuff, and I was still a little bit stuck, probably because of the languaging of it. How is the approach you take to water, say, different from having an ionizer or any of these, reverse osmosis things? What is the added value and quality it brings, in simple speak for me?
Sure. Well, the value that it brings in terms of creating what we call vortex events is transformative. When you think of the fact that your heart is a vortex generator and vortexing events are occurring throughout your body, these are transformative events that are occurring, and not just transformative, transmutational. We're talking about the ability to take compounds, molecules that are configured in certain ways and impressing these forces upon them that basically are forces of generation and destruction, you could say, but also reorganization. And the other thing about a vortex event is it's an energetic event. And when I say energetic, I'm talking electrical. We're creating a dynamo effect within the water molecules that essentially we're creating electricity, piezoelectricity, which is the electricity of life. And so what happens when you have all of those things occurring at once? You have generation of energy, you have the disintegration, you have implosion, you have explosion, so to speak. You have all these things happening at once. You actually have the ability to do a couple things. It helps to appreciate why scale happens, first of all. One reason scale happens is the very thing that is lacking is motion. So all these things have happened. The water body is sitting there, but for all practical purposes, it actually has no purpose. It has no direction. And there are no forces. It has literally lost its mojo. It's lost its momentum. Okay. And so as such, the compounds, the elements that are there have also, because of their particular ionic state, they're stuck the way they are. And because the motion forces, when there is spin, there are electrical as well as magnetic consequences to that motion, that spin dynamics. So we call the electrical piezoelectric, because life is also piezoelectric. We call the magnetic paramagnetic. All right. It turns out that paramagnetism is a very critical factor to life and to health. When you think of the fact that among the elements, for example, among the gases in particular, by far the most paramagnetic gas of all the elements is oxygen. And try imagining taking another breath that has no oxygen in it. That's how important something that's paramagnetic is. Now, the point basically is that oftentimes we through the respiration process, we have oxygen will get bound with other compounds such as carbon, because our biggest, you might say, I want to say waste product, so to speak, is actually carbon dioxide. And what is carbon dioxide? It's oxygen that is bound with some carbon, and we can't use it anymore. It's not available anymore. It's not because the carbon dioxide unto itself stays that way forever. No, it needs to go into a plant, and then the plant, through its processes, will separate the carbon again. They'll hold the carbon and they'll put the oxygen back out so we can use it again. I mean, that's a symbiosis of life, is the which oftentimes we forget. But inside a vortex generator, the spinning motion and all of these forces do many, many things. And one reason that scale happens is that spin has changed. It has gone down. And the forces, there's like a field. In having that spin, every molecule has a field around it. And that field pushes against each other. This field is what maintains a colloidal state. It maintains an even distribution of all of the elements within the water body. It also maintains a pressure that causes those molecules to be small, to be tiny, and allows them to penetrate everywhere. So in London, I have a story to tell about London too, and about the water, but in many, many cities around the world, they're chemicalizing, they're putting all this stuff in the water, okay? And I say chemicalizing not to demonize it at all. There's only one periodic table of elements, and so whatever is put in is from the same table. And what man can put together, nature can take apart. It's really not that hard, if you know what to do, okay? Yes. So we don't actually sit back and it's not us just making the water better. We're putting the water through a space where it can, through vortexing action, which is what it would do in a stream or in a river, it would basically fix itself. It redistributes what's there. And also it's energized again. And the process of being delivered, not to mention the treatment of the water at the treatment plant, but the process of getting it to your flat, to your domicile, wherever it is, through these straight pipes, are basically antithetical to what's natural for the water itself. So all of that momentum gets scrubbed off. They call it frictional loss. And by the time it gets to where you are and ready to use it, it's, for all practical purposes, flaccid. All right. Mm-hmm. And the elements simply fall out of solution and they start to accumulate because, again, of their charge. Whatever those elements are, they have a certain dominant charge to them, and then they start sticking to each other.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is that when you put a vortex generator on the water line, even one that has scale in it, one of the things, this was 10 years ago when I first started, going down this path, we were amazed to see that after putting one of these units on and running it through a water line that had scale in it, all of a sudden it started to descale itself. Now, why would that be? First of all, again, that motion dynamics has occurred, but in that time we didn't know really what was going on. So now we know that it's very much an electrical event. And what's an electrical event? It's the production of charged particles of various polarities. And so we're producing, you could say, an electron cloud is being produced because in order to facilitate the changing of these chemical, I want to say these configurations of elements, we call them chemicals, but they're really simply like an erector set. And this combination is so-and-so, but they're held together by bonds of charges, polarities. So when vortexing is done, there is production of electrons. There are productions of protons too. And then you got all this, you actually have a very, you do have violence, you have mayhem going on because you have all these collisions happening, but they are the types of impacts that cause and allow these molecules to be broken up. But once they're broken up, they don't reassemble in the same way. They will reassemble, they will recombine, they will, you could even say, repair. They will pair up again, but they won't be paired up in the way they were. nature will put like with like. Nature will put compatible with compatible, unlike man. Okay, which will force things. Okay, so I like to say that we create electrochemical changes in the water without electricity externally and without chemistry externally. It's just recombining, reconfiguring what's there through this natural motion dynamics.
Wow. So I remember watching some YouTube videos on like cymatics, the effect of sound frequency in shaping water.
Yes.
Is what you're describing similar to that, or is it got overlapping themes, but it's distinct?
They're the same principles, you know, and the interesting thing about cymatics is that what you're seeing is really the evidence of the, I want to say, the surety of frequencies, because you can go from one, you can come back to that and it'll go back to the same thing. It'll change and it'll come right back to that. That shows certain frequencies. I mean, frequencies are what is at the foundation of everything. What we don't notice, though, even in cymatics, but it's good to appreciate, is that those forms are not simply two-dimensional. They are actually three-dimensional. I mean, if you could, and actually in water, you likely could see it on in a totally different way, you know, because there is form to all of this. But the principles are the same. We can, in fact, tune our units for very specific situations, but we're not necessarily doing it. There are things that we're doing. There's certain materials, for example, in one of our units, we have, at one point, we put magnetite. We had actually a wall, if you will, a separate wall of magnetite, which created a field. I mentioned oxygen being the most paramagnetic gas in the periodic table. Among the, I guess I want to say minerals, more so, the most paramagnetic mineral is magnetite. Our brains have magnetite. Iron oxide is actually Fe3O4, I think is what magnetite is, quote unquote, chemically. But it has that combination. And again, it's Fe, that's iron oxide, Fe3O4. Again, there's that oxygen again. Okay, oxygen is real important. Okay, so the point basically is that there are things we can do and do in many ways, but vortexing is at the center of it.
Yeah, and so with the, you know, when you talk about vortexing, it's this sort of electrical event that, and this spin that you're talking about. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I've heard of the word vortex when people talk about Nikola Tesla, you know, vortex maths and that. So like with what you've done and what you've created based on all that, are you able to, I mean, the example you gave of the scale dissolving, that's a very kind of, I guess, a physical and a visible sign of the process, you know, and its effects. But have you, like, for example, have you formed, you know, kind of like, what is it I'm trying to say? I want to say research, but not necessarily with a capital R, where you can show the health effects in people that are consuming it, say, individually, or the difference on the cells? Have you gone that deep, or is it really just down to user experience?
Well, first of all, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. Ultimately, I feel the experience speaks a lot more genuinely than research. As we look at it today, a lot of research is done in laboratories, which are sterile, which are, you know, controlled and everything else. No one lives in a laboratory, you know. So experience, life is the laboratory as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And so, but in that regard, what we've observed, first of all, you got to do this. This has been my process over these years. First of all, you look at what's happening now. What are the consequences of how things are done right now? And this is probably a good place to tell my UK story. I've been to London twice. And not to say you're in London, but the point is, I've been there twice. I've been to Stonehenge. I've been out a little bit, you know, to some of the areas. And quite frankly, I love the place. I have some strong feeling of another place that I really like, you know. But I was there about, I guess, 10 years or so ago, 9 years or whatever. That's not my last trip. The first time I went, I happened to meet a lady. In fact, a friend of mine and I, we spoke at the Hale Center in London, and I did a talk on water, no less. The first time I actually spoke on water was in London at the Hale Center. And so here's what we're finding. We talked about pure water. The truth is, it carries little energy, which is part of our problem. Okay, it contributes to our problem, and yet when we're not looking at water as a factor, we don't see it as, we don't even give it any consideration, then we don't consider the impact when the decline is occurring. We're looking at all these other places, and it's just, we're drinking it in, we're bathing in it, we're getting these chemical baths, and the chemical soup is continuing to stew or something like that. Okay. But I went and I met a woman, and I will not remember where she was. I had to take some trains to get to her. Okay. But she was, I remember her name was Margaret. She was a widow. Her husband had passed not too long before that of prostate cancer. She was a teacher, and she had retired. She was in her 60s, someplace, and she loved teaching. And her retiring was not because, you know, she had enough of it. She was so stiff. She walked around almost like a robot. She was just, her joints were just so frozen, I guess would be the term. She had a hard time with mobility. At that time, even then, I had really a feeling it was the water, which I couldn't articulate the why of it then. I didn't understand it deeply enough. And that includes, it's in so many ways. But I realize now that the lack, for example, okay, getting back to what is a vortex doing, when you start looking at how people are, what people are experiencing today in terms of ailments, terms of health and stuff like that, few people would think that while they may suspect it, they don't tend to think, or it's easy to dismiss that the state, just simply the state of the water that they're in. And you could say the motion state, but to say the motion state also means the energetic state. It means the behavior of the water. It means the behavior and the water's ability to distribute its contents through all of the various places it has to go. Because some of the capillaries, for example, in our circulatory system are basically 1 cell wide. I mean, they are very, very tiny. And if you've got some compounds, some molecules that are kind of big, we could probably hardly see it with our eye. But to try to get it through a capillary, chances are, and you got a bunch of them, you're going to have obstructions. And you know something so simple, so seemingly innocuous as the state of the water and the water's ability to penetrate everywhere, as well as penetrate everywhere, but deliver its goods. So the goods that are in the water have to be broken up. They have to be reassembled in such a way so it can actually distribute it in a colloidal state, so that, because when it's well distributed, the water is going to be clear. The elements are going to be there, but the water is still going to be, you know, for the most part, you're not going to be able to see them. But on the other hand, because of that motion state, it's going to stay. It's going to be stable, because every time you use it, if you got a vortex generator on a line, every time you turn the water on, that next water is being energized. So your water that's in your system is generally stays energized. Every time you take a shower, every time you bathe, every time you, whatever, some more is coming in, and it keeps that water body in an energized state, as opposed to getting flaccid where it then just falls out of solution and just clogs up your pipe. The other thing that people don't realize is that when they put, okay, we get annoyed over the quote unquote hardness of the water. So then we start buying filters and other things. So then the filters start clogging up. Then the other part is the reverse osmosis, and then there's all the pressures. There is no natural correlation or corollary to the reverse osmosis effect. And essentially that water is energetically disturbed, but it's not healthy. Okay. Many ionizers, such as the ones that can dial up the pH of your water and stuff like that, they are also disturbing the water. Interestingly enough, the waters, even within those systems, tend to, or the constituents of those systems, tend to accumulate. Okay. And I've had one guy who checked out at one of our systems, and he had one of those popular ionizing systems, a several $1,000 one. And he put the unit on the water line coming into the ionizer. And he was amazed to see that the scaling stopped. And I told him, I said, well, now you know that my product works, but that's not really where you want to have it. I said, because what your system has done to the water has, really messed the water up, so if you're going to do anything at all, is you put one in the front and on the back, because it still needs to be Vortex again. Okay. Now, I don't want to go into philosophies about drinking ionized water, drinking high pH water and stuff like that. There are some definite benefits to molecular hydrogen, and there are some things that can be done, which we could talk about separately. But the bottom line is that from a health standpoint, the first part is starting to appreciate what the consequences, potential, in many cases, actual consequences of drinking or exposing yourself to water that is treated, that has not in some kind of way been energized again. We have done tests, and there are ways to do this in a lab and out to show the permeability of water that has gone through a Vortex unit. They talk in terms of surface tension. And that is one of the things, that the surface tension is reduced, and it can be shown in a simple way of getting paper bag, cutting a little piece of that paper, putting it down, taking some water from your faucet or whatever, in an eyedropper, dropping it on the paper bag. It's likely going to sit there. And then you get some Vortex water, get an eyedropper and drop that in there. And within a short period of time, it's gone. It has gone through. That's the penetration.
Well, I got that partially right, because some years ago, we actually did this demonstration. And we used eyedroppers. And as you can see while I'm talking, you can see the eyedroppers. In one side, there is tap water. On the other side, there is water that has been put through a Vortex unit. They refer to it, if I had the audio on, as photonic water, because none of these are my partners anymore, but we were partners in learning what water did, how it worked. And what this particular test actually showed was not just the penetration ability of water, which didn't happen as quickly or as we imagined or as we originally pictured it. But what it basically showed was how it allowed the water and caused the water to sustain. It didn't evaporate. One of the big ways that water is lost, and I'm going to say incoherent, non-vortexed, non-structured water is lost, is through simple evaporation, where it is actually laid out, it is applied, and then instead of going and sticking and adhering and being part of the plant or in the soil, it just returns to source, if you will. And so what you'll see here in the second little clip is where the water that came through, that was Vortex, is very clearly and very consistently still present. This was after about an hour or so. The original water, the tap water, there's no evidence of it anywhere. It's gone. And it's not in the paper, it's back in the atmosphere. That is a very big deal, especially when you're using millions of gallons to irrigate a farm, a lot of it is going right back to source before it gets anywhere to do you any good, especially when it's really hot. That's a big, big deal. And in many ways, you talk about the difference between health and disease. You can look at so many conditions such as osteoporosis. You can look at things such as strokes. All of these are plaque buildup. All of these are deposits. You know, you talk about bone spurs. There are so many things you can talk about that really could amount to nothing more than plumbing issues where your stuff is clogged with gunk. Yeah. And the water can't get through. Inflammation.
Yeah, just before I lose you on that point, because you were talking about penetration and delivery earlier on in this sort of section. Is that why, you know, people, when they're not drinking like normal tap water or whatever, and, you know, people say have 8-10 glasses a day, is that why you get that bloating effect? Because the water is not penetrating into the cell?
Well, yeah, and they're still taking a bunch of water in that in and of itself is not dynamic. Yeah. I mean, you know, so what are you doing? You're filling yourself up and you've already got obstruction issues. And so what happens? You just simply get more, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I noticed the reason you reminded me of something, and again, and I don't know how this was done or whether it relates anywhere near to what you've been talking about, but I remember many years ago going on one of the Tony Robbins events. This was in 2000, very early on. Mm-hmm. Back then, he was advocating the use of, it was called Penta water. And for a while it was available in this country, then they banned it. So back in the States. But what he said was that with that water, they basically altered the structure of the water so it could get into your system more quickly. And I thought, you know, like anything, proof of the pudding is in the testing, like you say, user experience. And I must say, even though I didn't totally understand the science behind it to articulate it, back then I used to have problems with my monthly cycle, and I had supposedly thyroid issues, so very sluggish in the morning, you know. And so I kept one of these Penta small bottles of water beside my bed, like within arm's length. And in the morning I would just, when we had to get up for something, I'd just drink it and then just lie back. And I must admit, within 10 minutes, I was feeling a relative degree of alertness that I didn't before. And again, as I say, I don't know how much that process is a match for yours, but I had that experience enough to get me on the trail of starting to think about water differently, and everything that you've said, it makes sense to me, because I'm still clearing up some issues around inflammation from my own, you know, a lot of it from trauma and tragedy that's happened, and you know, everything's connected, isn't it? So, you know, people say you are what you eat, and I say, no, that's one layer of it. You are what you drink, you are what you eat, you are what you think, you are what you feel, you know. It's all of that. You are your soul, your spirit, and it's the combination of all that expressing itself, not just, you know, food. And I actually believe the mind is that powerful that you could have kind of cheap food and transmutate it through the power of your mind. But that's another story. But it's like,
but it is true.
Yeah, but it's people, you know, we live in a world where things are separated into components, and then the components are put forward as the solution, where really they are only a part of a whole. So, you know, this is why I was intrigued when I started to read your site, because I had read, you know, I like to look into things deeper beyond medicine, because I feel that if it wasn't for my own intuition, I'd actually be dead by now, you know, rather than relying on a health service that's built on a crisis model, and then a perspective on health that is not only component, but looks at it from organs, not the energy things that you're talking about. And I do wonder, Adam, this is why I want to, you know, perhaps, you know, incrementally, first of all, start off with myself. And I have used the ionizers, some of them, not all of the expensive ones, in the quest to at least improve my experience, because of it's interesting here now. I very rarely see bottled water. I see the plastic bottled water, but not the glass bottled water.
Right.
And, I've been drinking out of the plastic because of wanting to avoid the tap water, and sometimes it's like jumping out of the frying pan into another fire.
Sure.
But I do wonder, just based on this thing that quite a high percentage of our body is water, what the impact of drinking, properly energized water, if I can use that simple term, cross-reference the way you've been talking about it. I'll be intrigued to know how that impacts some of the health stuff I'm cleaning up in my body.
Well, first of all, water that is more penetrating, more energized as a function of penetrating as a function of being energized, or vice versa, is going to be more permeating. First of all, so that means, you have extracellular fluids, you have intracellular fluids, and you have even the pressures between the two, if there's a differential. And penetrability, so to speak, is key, because what happens inside that cell is also important to the health of that cell. First of all, there's waste that is produced. I mean, in other words, the reasons why our biggest waste is carbon dioxide, as an example, is because carbon dioxide is what the cells put out. So we have trillions of cells in our body. So every breath that we exhale is putting carbon dioxide out. It's because that's what's inside us. And the point, basically, the water needs to be, again, it's got to get everywhere. And waters that cannot penetrate cell walls, as an example, cannot deliver safely its goods in capillaries that are only one cell wide, well, you're going to have problems in that regard. I think that's worth appreciating unto itself. I mean, that's just intellectually. Well, you start to say, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when we see that water that has been vortexed can and does penetrate far easier, then you start looking at the health. Here's our other evidence. I have some of my customers purchase units, and then they start testing for themselves. So what they do is they will take for their plants, for their animals. I'll talk about animals first. And so just put down 2 dishes, water dishes for their animals. One with their water that they had, their regular water, tap, whatever it is, and then one that has been put through the Vortex unit. Within 5 days' time, they don't drink that other water at all. They can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Right? We certainly see it with plants. We see faster germination times. We see faster and more complete development of root systems within plants. We see higher productivity. We see increases in nutrient density and bricks counts, for example. All of that is evidence and results and consequences of higher permeability, okay? And getting and higher and more complete distribution.
Yeah.
Because that's what you need to do. And we also understand the simple fact, and this is even not just for city water that has been delivered through pipes, in straight lines for a long time. This can be water that sits in a well, because relatively speaking, that well water is still somewhat inactive, and then we suck it up to use. Putting a vortex generator on a line, or as I see it at least, is something simply to do before you start to use it, because it brings it up again. And of course, every time you use it, whether you take a shower or something like that, it's sucking more in, but it's keeping that body within the plumbing supply. It's going to be energized, relatively speaking. It's not going to lose it as soon as you turn the spigot off.
Yeah, and I made a note here whilst you were talking about that to ask you, if water is energized in the way you've described, that vortex effect, does it also follow that you then don't need to drink so much of it? Because, people say you need 8 to 10 glasses a day and it needs to be alkalized. But what I'm hearing, or slightly alkalized, what I'm hearing from you is water just being alkalized is not enough. It has some benefit, but if it's just that, that's not enough because of the energy stuff you talked about. But also, if you are drinking water that is aligned in this way, presumably, or I don't know, do you need to drink 8 to 10?
Well, because the water, that has been vortex, that is in this energetic state, is far more penetrating, it is more energetic, etc. That energy also means that it facilitates the cells clearing and taking the trash out, so to speak. So water's got to come in, but also it takes the trash out, and it really facilitates a flow. And in that regard, we've got to a place that we are so formulaic about things that we don't really cultivate a sensitivity to what our body is actually telling us in the moment, because there is no one overarching formula of what's right for everyone. As much as people want to do, ultimately, what do you need? What do I need? And the truth is, when and as we develop a relationship, a respect and a trust for our own complex, and that doesn't stop with our body, it includes the whole of who and what we are. When we develop a relationship with that, the guidance is there, and it'll tell us, we'll get signs. You know, you feel, I need to have some water. You just get it.
You just get it, yeah. It's almost
the body
like
is a lot more capable than we have been led to believe. And quite frankly, the entire, I'll say, medical industry is built around our ignorance of how capable our physiology, mental, emotional, and spiritual, as well as physical, actually is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's just like your body has its own intelligence, but it's tuning into it, like you say, and developing the relationship with it. And certainly I've had experiences with just doing that process, and we can all get better at it for sure. But I tend to agree with you from my own discovery, rather than, as you say, just a simple intellectual. And I also agree that, you know, it's very easy for society, and, you know, I'm sort of not just starting, in some cases starting, but in others, to question everything I've learned, because it's been passed down through an education system and media, which is why I want my own TV channel there, that is kind of predicated, as you say, on this formula and component type thing, and then at the same time has a habit of making certain things more complex than they need to be. And it's kind of
complex and confounding. Being confounding is an important part of that, because we need to have the sense that we can't understand, which is totally false.
Yeah, right. And so it's almost like, you know, certainly the more I journey with these things, I'm thinking I need to unlearn almost, rather than learn. It's like you said about clearing out the trash first before you can take on board, you know, the meaningful stuff, because then they just kind of collide in this, and it does become confounding. So that's kind of, you know, what I'm hearing, because I've, like, as I said, incrementally in my attempt to depart from some of that mainstream stuff that I've questioned, you know, I've tried the alkaline water and whatever, and yeah, I get that you need to do it for a sufficient period before even making a judgment call on it. But I've just always had the sense that even that is a component piece. You know, just saying drink more alkaline water, I'm not saying would not have any benefits, and I would not judge anyone that says it has. But within me, I'm thinking, yeah, but it's the life of the water itself, you know.
I agree. One thing that is often not appreciated, and this one I talk about this, there's a certain cloud of ignorance that we tend to live in regarding our own physiology and the complex, because the physiology has the ability to adjust and handle its needs. If the water isn't, it has the ability to adjust things. Our responsibility, as I see it, is to make certain we provide as much of the elements that are necessary for the life and all of the programming, the natural programming that is within it, to basically do what it does. That also is predicated too on our thinking, our habitual and predominant states of mind, because simply by thinking in certain ways also create certain chemistries. And so, you can have the best and most awesome, product and technology, but if people don't understand that they themselves are actually creating their chemistry as a function of their patterns and habits of thinking and reacting, then they'll never know that they are their biggest problem, as well as they are their own biggest liberator from those problems.
Yeah, I think, I'm so glad to hear you say that, Adam, because, more and more as I journey, I'm thinking, gosh, we don't really grasp the power of our own mind, if you like, or call it human potential, whatever, that creative force. And I say that to myself even now. There's always more to discover and more to become better at. And I kind of think if we did grasp it sufficiently, we would be living very differently to start with, but also the good that could be done on this planet by people manifesting in different ways, the things we call miracles would become more normal.
Yes.
To the degree that we, it's one thing to subscribe to something and say, yeah, I believe that, but it's another thing to operate from that place as well.
Absolutely.
And,
when we harken back to, we were talking about education, social conditioning, let us just say, and you start realizing that power that you're talking about right now is always there, and it is discoverable by each person, but only by the person. And so when you start looking at what's been layered on for generations, I'm talking about for centuries. And of course, we've come to this state in terms of our social habits today. And we've got so many institutionalized practices that starting with the birth cycle and process itself, massive trauma that's become normal and customary as a function of coming into this reality. The being creates the form and then inhabits the form, and then the form comes down and it's got to be dealt with, smacks and this, that, and the other, and then they got to jab it and put all these chemicals in. They're turning certain things off. They're creating psychological breaks. They're creating dissociative states just as a function, and they're all unnatural. These are not normal states. We don't know who we are, but I'll tell you this, those actions and activities and policies, these policies are being reinforced. They're not taking their foot off the pedal.
No.
They're trying to do it even worse, okay? But the point basically is that one thing that these traumas do, as well as the social, let us say, disapproval of these more subtle areas of discussion and consideration, and the one to stay away from those particular areas, because that's where your power actually is. Yeah. Your power is there. Our power to know ourselves, to heal, and not only that, to protect ourselves. We don't need guns. We don't need bombs. We don't need us to protect ourselves. Yeah. Love is the key to all of that. These are choices that people, when they choose to make those things, it comes from within. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you, and I get the feeling we could have even more discussions about something, because it's like, I say to myself, and I don't know when I sense this in myself, and we're all different, we're on our paths, but there is, I believe that love, that universal love, that unconditional love, is both the creative and the connecting force of the universe, and that we can align and be a force for good, to use the phrase, or utilize it in this other way that you reference, guns and violence and conflicts and all that. But ultimately it does come from within, because most things you can see through the human eye, it started off with within for it to be created. So sort of from an early age, I was kind of bogged by this "what is the truth," thing. Some people say, call you truth seekers and that, but however it gets dressed up, the desire to know the truth and live freely within that truth, as uncomfortable as that can be in this world, as it's displaying at the moment. But I do, I certainly echo and agree with that. And I think that I was going to say the funny thing, it's not at all funny, but the irony of it is that our biggest source of power is free within us. And it's free. It's not like you have to pay thousands for it. And yet we live as if it's not, and then kind of it gets externalized into other things. But it's just, to me, amazing, even though I am still grasping this in more and more layers, is that it's free and it's directly accessible because it's within. And if you say that to certain people, that the greatest source of power ever is actually within you and it's free, no, people don't believe that could be. But that's what I'm continually waking up to and reminding myself in the day-to-day as well. You have direct access no matter what's playing out today. If it's a problem or a challenge or somebody's behaved badly, go within, and work it from within, and if necessary, forgive yourself as well when you sort of go out of alignment from whatever the truth is. But go within rather than out first. Make that your default position and work it from there. And it's a discipline and a practice, because we're, like you say, we're just conditioned and we've bought into this stuff, if you like, that's become memories in our system because it's just passed down and we adopt it and never really question it.
We were not only that we didn't question, we were essentially encouraged not to question.
Not to question.
Okay, that's the other thing. You're encouraged to do what? Go to an expert, go to an authority, and therefore you're not the authority. You're not the expert. You're confounded. You don't know what this is, and yet we've been taught to do these various things, or we have been, by experience, become familiar with these different ways of doing things without any sense. There's a certain innocence that humanity has, whether we're ignorant or not. It's an innocent ignorance, as far as I'm concerned, because we have been, if we were left to our natural ways, we don't know what a natural human is because we've been steeped in unnatural ways and methods, whether it's food, whether it's medicine, whether it's even government, so to speak. Government is basically about managing the masses. And as such, the masses in general are being, you might say, detuned. Their facilities have been diminished, and it's also their powers, and they don't even know what they don't know. They don't know what they're missing. They don't even have an idea that it exists, even though it's there for them.
Yeah.
That's really the issue here.
Yeah, and I think that's why we all need our own awakening, if you like, to that, because you can't, it's very difficult to reason with somebody in a conditioned state, because the nature is this, it's so deeply ingrained. And, even in the coaching and mentoring, the book I wrote, I said to people, don't take this just because I've said it. I'm sharing what I've discovered. What I want you to do is question things and start to own your own life and awaken to your own power. You're not here to be a clone of me. And I get very irritated. Some of my friends, they deliberately pull my leg and go, Guru. I said, I will, don't. It irritates me because I don't consider, like you say, we all have access to that power within. Maybe some of us have journeyed differently and have discovered more of it, and we're just trying to get others to, access their own inheritance and say, hey, look, but like you say, everybody has got that within them. It's just a question of what we've tapped into and unfolded in our lives.
Right.
For me, I had to have an awakening because in years gone by, I was just so intellectually everything was in the head, and I've had to learn to get out of the head and start to explore rather than just think and analyze and all this stuff that I was brought up to do. I come from that cultural background where it's hard work and this, and You know, a lot of life is about letting go of these things so that, as you say, what is innocent and true can start to reveal itself to each of us. So it's been fascinating listening to you and your perspective, Adam, and a lot of things that are resonating with me.
I love the interaction, and I oftentimes will go out. I go out into the forest in terms of where we're living here, and I get in front of the camera and I just talk. But it's really great to interact with people. They're asking questions, and now we can respond extemporaneously because your questions are the questions of many people. And there's something good about that dynamism as well that, you know, is beyond what's obvious. You know, so I thank you for that too.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure, Adam, and thank you for your time and sharing freely in the way you have. And I'll look forward to your email and some more yin and yang.
All right, then. Thanks a lot, Anita. You take
Have a
care
lovely
now.
day. Bye for now,
You
Adam.
too now. Bye.
I hope you found our conversation informative and beneficial. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us just like Anita did. You can contact us at info@presidentwater.com. You can dial our toll-free number and you'll get most likely or eventually moi. And also you can certainly, if you want to buy product, you can order them at presidentwater.com. A couple things I will say: these units are made in Australia, and I'm happy to say they're made by guys, I'm presuming they're guys who care about their work. I know it's managed by my partner Jody, and I know darn well he, as well as I, care about the quality of how these are made as well as what they do. See, we don't really have any question anymore about what they do because we're using the power of the vortex itself. It's Mother Nature, if you will. It's the forces of nature, it's the forces of creation that we have put, we have created a way to actualize inside this. And those forces are actually doing the heavy lifting. We just had to do the formation, and we had to do a little tweaking and designing on our own, as well as the workmanship, to make it something that you can use, whether it's for your home or whether it's for your farm. We have them for sizes for every farm. I mean, when you really get down to the things that we are talking about, and you realize your investment in fertilizers and various amendments, a lot of it, and water, oh my goodness, a lot of the water that you have to pay for, whether it's in drilling wells, whether it's in electricity, or whether it's coming from your municipality or from the water district, some of it, a lot of it, simply goes up in evaporation if it's not in a really, I will say, organized and energetic state. And as you could see in that little simple demonstration, just a simple vortex, because that test was done with a gravity-fed vortex unit. It was not with one water that goes through this is going to be far more energetic, far greater efficiency. You'd have to do that a number of times through a handheld unit, a gravity unit, whereas the speed and the velocity that water takes going through here is going to be a lot more effective. And in that regard, just in the evaporation savings alone, they are significant. And so I'm saying all of this, maybe I'm refusing to get off the camera, because they're just, if you've watched this far, I want to thank you. But these units should literally be on every pivot, every irrigation system, They should be on every home. They should be on every apartment building. They should be on every school, certainly on every hospital. I'm talking in the world of should be, which I tend not to live in. But when you start to appreciate the truth of what I'm saying, it makes it easier for you to make the decision to get one for yourself right now, but also to talk to and tell others about it, or share or bring others to our attention. Now, the one other thing I will say at the very end, if you got an issue with the cost of these, but you do appreciate what they do, and you realize that we are not, there's no maintenance involved with these. When you buy one of these things, I mean, the only thing is we're making and we're guaranteeing workmanship, but outside of that, you're not going to be buying filters, replacing all time and time again. You're going to be getting the benefit of what you put in the water. If you're growing, you should essentially expect that you're going to be getting more crop yields. You're going to actually be making a lot. But if you got an issue with paying the amount to get this, at least for purchases up to $10,000, it may be possible that you can put it on installments. And if you're wondering about that, simply email me too again at info@presidentwater.com. I'll tell you how that's done. You can put it on your credit card, but you can pay in installments, and that's between you and the credit card company, but we've got that worked out. So with that in mind, thank you again. Until next time, we'll be talking more about Vortex generators and about how to change the quality of your life, the quality of your health, the quality of your farming and your business, especially where water is concerned. Till then, peace. Be well, and I love you all.